Hey everyone, ever get that like little uneasy feeling when you're at the ATM?
Mhm.
Like, is someone watching me? Does something feel a bit off?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
We've been hearing a lot about a new ATM scam and thought it would be a good idea to, do a deep dive for you all.
It's a good one. Yeah.
We're looking at a video today by Boyd Cluess, cybersecurity expert extraordinaire. You can find him over on YouTube where he breaks down, these really complex like cybersecurity topics, but he does it with a sense of humor. So,
He's good. He's really good at making it accessible.
yeah. And he's uncovered this scam that seems, you know, at first glance pretty simple, but it reveals, I think, some pretty big weaknesses in like
Mhm.
how we all kind of think about ATM security.
For sure.
So this scam is called the superglue setup.
Okay.
I know. The name's pretty out there, but it kind of explains it. Criminals are literally gluing the card slot shut. So it forces you to use that tap function.
Oh, that's so devious.
I know. He even shares a story in the video about this woman in California who was just trying to take out $40, ended up with $960 in fraudulent charges because of this.
Oh, wow. That's awful. I read about that too. And what I thought was really interesting was that helpful stranger element.
Oh, tell me about it. Yeah.
Like, it's not just about the glue, it's about, manipulating people at
Yeah.
like a vulnerable moment.
Yeah,
Right.
totally. It makes you rethink every time someone tries to be nice to you at the ATM. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
But okay, I get the glue part. I get the, helpful stranger. But why is the tap function so vulnerable? Like what's going on there?
So it all boils down to how, like, some ATM systems handle how they do the authentication.
Okay.
You know how when you use your card in TN, like you often have to re-enter your PI or do something else, like another step to, verify it's you if you want to do a second transaction.
Yeah.
But with contactless, sometimes that extra security layer just isn't there.
Oh, so someone could like walk away thinking everything's done, and then the scammer's like still lurking around ready to like drain their account.
That's exactly it.
Hmm.
The victim in Boyd's example, she thought everything was fine. She went on her way. But her session was still open. I always say it's like leaving your front door unlocked, you know?
Yeah.
Anyone with the right tools can just walk right in.
I never thought about it that way.
It's true. Sometimes convenience comes at the cost of security.
Yeah. I think we're all about quick and easy, but, we got to be mindful of those trade-offs. It
Exactly.
makes you wonder if those tap and go options are, really worth it.
Mm.
But I think what's maybe even more infuriating is how the bank reacted.
Oh, yeah.
So Boyd said that the victim in the story, she banked with Chase.
Okay.
And at first they told her, too bad you authorized it. Like, are you kidding me?
Oh, no.
It's like, come on, she was tricked.
I can see why the bank might take that stance, like initially. Yeah. Their systems probably show that first PN entry as legitimate, so to them, any transactions after that look, well, authorized.
Ah, okay.
It often takes, a deeper dive to figure out it was fraud, and unfortunately, sometimes the banks don't prioritize that until they're kind of forced to.
And in this case, it took media attention for them to actually do the right thing,
Looks like it.
which, is good for her. But what about everyone else who doesn't have, ABC News on speed dial?
Right. That's where it becomes like a much bigger conversation about these systemic issues.
Yeah, exactly.
Banks do have a responsibility to protect their customers, but it often feels like they're more focused on, limiting their own liability. We need stronger regulations. We need accountability
Yes.
to make sure that, like, consumer protection is a priority.
Okay, I need a minute to like process all of this
Hmm.
because we've got this superglue scam that reveals this potential problem with contactless systems. And then we have the banks potentially like dragging their feet when it comes to protecting their customers.
Yeah.
So what do we do? Like, do we just stop using APMs altogether?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's
No.
not all doom and gloom. Boyd gives some really great advice on how to actually protect yourself.
Okay, good.
It's not about, like, abandoning contactless altogether. It's just using it wisely and, knowing what the risks are.
Okay, let's hear it. I'm ready to feel empowered.
Yeah.
What are Boyd's tips?
So tip number one, if you see a glued card slot, just don't use that ATM.
Okay, I mean, that seems pretty obvious.
Right. But in the heat of the moment, you're frustrated, you're in a hurry, it's easy to ignore red flags, especially if you've got like a helpful stranger hanging around.
Yeah, those helpful strangers are sounding a lot less helpful now.
Exactly. So that brings us to tip number two. If you do use contactless, you always, always have to make sure you fully close out your session before you walk away.
Okay.
Don't just assume it's finished because you got your cash or whatever you were doing.
That's a good point, like making sure you lock your door even if you're just stepping out for a second.
Right. And tip number 3, you guessed it, be aware of your surroundings.
Okay.
Boyd puts it, he says, stranger danger, y'all.
I love it.
Avoid ATMs in like dimly lit areas or, isolated areas. And if someone's giving you bad vibes, just trust your gut and move on.
Trust your gut. That's a great life motto in general,
It is.
but especially when it comes to our finances.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we talked about, avoiding the scam in the first place, but what if we're in that situation where we go up to an ATM and that card slot is glued shut? Is there anything else that we could do?
Boyd's last tip is the most important one. Trust your instincts. If anything feels off, whether it's the ATM, the people around, just a gut feeling, just walk away. It's always better to be safe than sorry.
I love that. And I think this is the perfect place to take a quick pause. We've uncovered this, superglue setup. We've started to kind of unpack this bigger picture of ATM security, but there's still so much more to talk about. When we come back, we're going to dig deeper into those systemic issues and explore what we can all do to actually advocate for some change. Don't go anywhere. And we're back. Before the break, we were talking about how this superglue scam is really more of a symptom of a much bigger problem, right?
Yeah. Kind of reminds me of that old saying, for want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, the horse was lost, and so on and so on. So this tiny bit of glue, it points to vulnerabilities in our financial systems that could, have much bigger consequences.
I see what you mean, yeah. If something is, low-tech as glue can disrupt the whole thing, what else is out there?
Exactly. That's the question we need to be asking. And Boyd touched on this thing called the PCSS compliant framework, but I think we need to, really break that down a little more. Have you ever heard of it?
Honestly, not really. Is it
No.
I don't know, a set of rules for banks or something?
It is, think of it like building codes, but for financial data security.
Okay.
So the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, or PCI DSS, sets the minimum requirements for any company that's handling, credit card information.
So they have to make sure they're protecting our data properly.
Exactly.
So if everyone's following this, framework, things like this superglue scam, they shouldn't be happening, right?
Well, in theory, if there are regular inspections and checks, they should be catching this kind of tampering. But like any system, there are, always going to be weak points. And it's are the inspections actually happening as often as they should? Are they thorough enough? Are companies really prioritizing security? Or are they just, going through the motions? Those are the things that we need to think about.
Okay, so let's say, hypothetically, those inspections aren't happening properly, and this framework isn't as, solid as it should be. What can we do, just the average person using the ATM, what can we do about this? It feels kind of overwhelming, to be honest.
I hear you. It's easy to feel kind of powerless when you're talking about these huge, systems. But you got to remember, those systems are made up of people,
Okay.
and people respond to pressure.
So you're saying we got to make some noise.
Exactly. Awareness is the first step. The more people know about these scams and these underlying issues, well, first of all, the less likely they are to fall victim to them. And then also the more pressure we can put on institutions to actually make real changes.
Right. Knowledge is power.
Exactly.
I'm all about that. It's giving everyone superpowers. What else can we do?
Don't be afraid to, hold these companies accountable.
Yeah.
If you experience a scam, or even if you just see something suspicious, at the ATM, report it. Don't just shrug it off and think, oh, someone else will take care of that. Be that squeaky wheel.
Right. Demand answers. What about, those of us who haven't, encountered this specific scam? What can we do? Proactively.
Absolutely. Support the organizations that are fighting for stricter regulations, consumer protections. There are so many great advocacy groups out there doing really important work in this space.
Okay, so we can, use our voices, use our wallets to push for systemic change. But in the meantime, are there any other practical steps that we can take right now to protect ourselves?
Boyd's advice is a great starting point. Choose ATMs that are in well-lit, high-traffic areas. Pay attention to your surroundings, And when it comes to contactless payments, think of it unlocking your front door.
Okay.
You wouldn't leave your front door wide open, would you?
Definitely not.
Make sure that you're closing out those sessions and locking the door to, protect that information.
Something that really struck me in all of this is, not just the financial impact of these scams, but like also the emotional one too. Like it must feel just awful to realize that you've been tricked and then have the bank basically blame you for it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like this feeling of violation and betrayal, and it's really tough to deal with.
Yeah. We've been talking about like, practical steps,
Mm.
but what about resources for that emotional fallout? Like what advice would you give to someone who's like actually gone through this?
Well, first of all, know that you're not alone. This happens to a lot of people, and it's not your fault.
Yeah.
And, don't be afraid to reach out for support. Talk to friends and family. Find, a local support group. And there are also organizations that can help you, like, navigate the process of, reporting the crime and, recovering financially. Don't suffer in silence.
This has been like a really great conversation. We've covered so much. We've gone from like this little dab of super glue to like, this whole systemic overview of ATM security. And
Mm.
before we wrap up, I just want to hear from you all, the listeners. Like what resonated with you most in this conversation? What are you thinking about? We'll be back for one final part to share some additional thoughts and resources, so stay tuned. We're back for the final part of our deep dive into ATM scams.
Yeah, looking at all these security issues.
We covered a lot from that super glue thing to like the bigger vulnerabilities in the system.
It's been pretty intense, but, the thing is, we're not helpless.
Right. We can't like, completely change how the banks work,
Yeah.
but we can take steps to, be smarter and be safer.
Yeah, exactly. Knowledge is power, right?
Yeah.
And when we share that knowledge, it helps protect everyone.
Totally.
Like if you talk to your friends and family, tell them about these scams. That goes a long way.
It's like a neighborhood watch, but for our money,
Right. We got to look out for each other.
for sure. So if something seems off, trust that gut feeling. Don't be afraid to walk away from a shady ATM.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to push back if the bank isn't listening.
You mentioned some resources for reporting scams and getting support. Can you remind us about those?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So the FBI has this thing called the Internet Crime Complaint Center, IC3 for short.
Okay.
They take reports of internet crimes, and they can help you find the right resources.
That's great. And for people who want to like really get involved in making things better, like pushing for better security and, better protection for consumers,
Yeah.
are there any organizations you recommend?
Yeah, there are a lot of good ones out there.
Yeah.
The National Consumers League, for example, they've been fighting for consumer rights for over 100 years.
Wow, that's incredible. And don't worry, we'll put links to all those resources in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll make sure you have them.
So any final thoughts before we wrap things up?
This fight for financial security, it's something that's always going on.
Yeah.
It's not about being paranoid, it's about being aware and, taking control.
Yeah.
We can all make a difference, Stay vigilant, speak up, and demand more from the people who handle our money.
That's a great way to put it.
Mm.
To all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've learned some useful tips and, feel a little more confident when you're out there using those ATMs.
Mm-hmm. And remember, if you're ever unsure about something, just come back and listen again. We're always here.
Until next time, stay
Mhm.
curious, stay safe, and keep diving deep.